I've always dreamed of having a little house in the mountains. You know, the kind of place where you can sit outside with a cup of tea, breathe fresh air, and feel like the world is far, far away. Last year, that dream came true. I found this cozy cabin tucked into the side of a hill, surrounded by tall pine trees and breathtaking views of the valley below. It wasn't fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room with a stone fireplace. But it felt perfect for me. Every time I stepped onto the deck, I felt like I'd finally escaped the noise and stress of city life. The mornings were peaceful, with sunlight streaming through the trees, and the evenings were magical, with stars so bright they looked close enough to touch. I loved everything about it. The quiet, the beauty, even the occasional deer wandering through my yard. For the first time in years, I felt truly happy. But then, one crisp autumn afternoon, there was a knock on my door. Standing there was Evelyn Carter, the president of the Homeowners Association, HOA, for the gated community surrounding my property. She looked polished, wearing an expensive coat and carrying herself like someone who expected everyone to do exactly what she said. Her smile was polite, but her eyes gave her away. They were sharp, calculating. "Good afternoon," she said in a voice that sounded sweet, but had an edge to it. "Lovely place you have here." "Thank you," I replied, trying to sound friendly but feeling a little uneasy. Something about her made me nervous. She handed me a glossy pamphlet titled *HOA Policies and Procedures*. As part of our guidelines, she continued, all homeowners are required to allocate 1 guest room in their homes for use by visiting board members during inspections or official events. I blinked at her, sure I must have misunderstood. "Wait, what? You want me to give up one of my rooms? For you?" Her smile tightened. "It's not just for me. It's for any authorized HOA representative. It's clearly stated in Rule 34C of your agreement." I flipped through the pamphlet, scanning the pages until I found it. Rule 34C, bolded and underlined, stating that every homeowner had to designate 1 bedroom exclusively for HOA use whenever they asked. My stomach sank. This couldn't be real. Who does something like this? And why hadn't anyone mentioned this bizarre rule before I bought the house? "This has to be some kind of joke," I said, shaking my head. "There's no way I'm giving up a room in my own home." Evelyn's expression turned icy. "I assure you, it's no joke. If you refuse to comply, we'll have no choice but to take legal action." Legal action? Over a spare bedroom? I wanted to laugh, but deep down, I knew she wasn't bluffing. This woman meant business. As she walked away, leaving me standing there stunned, I realized my mountain sanctuary might not be as peaceful as I'd thought. What started as my dream retreat was quickly turning into a nightmare, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. That night, I sat by the fire, staring at the flames, and wondering how things had gone so wrong so fast. How could anyone think it was okay to demand access to someone else's home? It didn't make sense. But one thing was clear: Evelyn wasn't going to back down, and neither was I. At first, I tried to convince myself that Evelyn's demand was just a ridiculous misunderstanding. Maybe she'd exaggerated the rule, or maybe it wasn't enforced anymore. But as the days passed, reminders started arriving in my mailbox and inbox. Emails, letters, even voicemails, all repeating the same message: comply with Rule 34C or face consequences. Each notification felt like another weight pressing down on me. I couldn't believe this was happening. Who did these people think they were? My mountain house wasn't part of some luxury resort. It was my home, a place I'd worked hard to buy and maintain. The idea of strangers walking in and claiming a room whenever they wanted made me sick to my stomach. It wasn't just invasive, it was wrong. And yet, the HOA seemed determined to push their agenda no matter what. One evening, after receiving yet another threatening letter, I called my best friend, Lisa, to vent. She listened patiently as I ranted about Evelyn and her absurd demands. When I finally ran out of steam, she said, "You need to talk to a lawyer." Seriously, don't let them bully you." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. A lawyer? That sounded extreme. But deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't something I could handle alone. The next morning, I searched online for attorneys who specialized in real estate disputes and came across Daniel Harper. His name popped up again and again in reviews praising him for taking on tough cases against big corporations and winning. Nervously, I picked up the phone and scheduled a consultation. Daniel's office was sleek and professional, lined with shelves filled homey leather-bound books and framed awards. He greeted me warmly, his handshake firm but reassuring. As I explained the situation, he listened intently, nodding occasionally without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "They're playing dirty," he said bluntly. "This isn't about protecting property values or maintaining community standards. It's about control. They're trying to intimidate you into submission." His words sent a chill down my spine, but they also gave me a strange sense of relief. Finally, someone understood how unfair this whole thing was. For weeks, I'd been carrying the burden of anger and frustration by myself, wondering if I was overreacting. Hearing Daniel validate my feelings made me realize I wasn't crazy. They were. "Don't worry," he added with a confident smile. "We'll fight them. But we need to prepare carefully. Gather everything you have. Emails, letters, anything related to this issue. Document every interaction with Evelyn and the HOA. We'll use it to build our case." Over the next few days, I scored my files and combed through old communications, saving every piece of evidence I could find. I even recorded a couple of phone calls when Evelyn called to check on my decision. Every time I listened to her clipped tone and thinly veiled threats, my resolve hardened. I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. Meanwhile, tension in the neighborhood began to rise. Word spread quickly about my refusal to comply, and opinions split like wildfire. Some neighbors quietly supported me, slipping notes under my door saying things like, "Good for you," or "Hang in there." Others avoided me altogether, clearly afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. A few openly sided with the HOA, glaring at me during walks or muttering disapproving comments when they thought I couldn't hear. But despite the growing divide, one thing became crystal clear. Evelyn wasn't used to being challenged. Her polished exterior hid a streak of ruthlessness, and she wasn't about to let me defy her without a fight. Little did I know, the battle was about to escalate far beyond anything I'd imagined. True to their word, the HOA didn't waste any time before escalating things. 2 weeks after my last conversation with Evelyn, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. My heart sank as I opened it and pulled out the contents, a formal lawsuit. The document was filled with legal jargon, but the message was clear. I was being sued for $50,000 in damages plus court costs because I refused to comply with Rule 34C. They claimed my refusal had caused irreparable harm to the community's operations and reputation. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the papers in disbelief. How could they justify suing me over something so ridiculous? It felt like I'd stepped into some twisted alternate reality where common sense didn't exist. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, each one making me angrier and more scared. This wasn't just about a spare bedroom anymore. It was about control, power, and intimidation. I called Daniel right away. He listened calmly as I explained what had happened, his voice steady and reassuring. "This is exactly what they want," he said. "They're trying to scare you into giving up. Don't let them." "But $50,000. I stammered. "That's insane. What if I lose?" "You won't," he replied firmly. "We'll fight this every step of the way. And while we're at it, we'll hit back hard." Daniel filed a countersuit later that day, accusing the HOA of harassment, breach of contract, and violating my rights as a homeowner. He argued that the original agreement I'd signed when purchasing the house was vague and unreasonable, designed to trap homeowners into compliance without fully understanding what they were agreeing to. As soon as the countersuit was filed, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could turn the tables on them. But the relief didn't last long. A few days later, I came home from running errands to find Evelyn waiting for me on my porch. She wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a tall, sharply dressed man who introduced himself as Gregory Mills, the HOA's attorney. His polished suit and confident demeanor made him look like he belonged in a courtroom drama, but there was something cold about his smile that set me on edge. "Good afternoon," Evelyn said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "We hope to resolve this amicably, but since you've chosen to escalate matters—" "This isn't escalation. It's standing up for myself," I shot back, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. Gregory raised a hand, silencing Evelyn mid-sentence. "Let's not get too emotional here," he said smoothly. "Surely we can come to a compromise." Before I could respond, a car pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Daniel, briefcase in hand. Relief washed over me at the sight of him. Somehow, knowing he was on my side made the situation feel less overwhelming. "Compromise implies mutual respect," Daniel said coolly as he approached us. "Your client hasn't shown any." For the next hour, the four of us stood on my porch, exchanging tense words and thinly veiled threats. Evelyn tried to act composed, but I could see frustration creeping into her expression. Gregory remained calm, though his eyes narrowed slightly whenever Daniel pointed out flaws in the HOA's case. By the time they'd finally left, I was exhausted, but also determined. As Daniel packed up his things, he turned to me with an encouraging smile. "You handled that well," he said. "Now let's get ready for the next round." Little did I know, the battle was about to take a turn I never saw coming. The days leading up to the next phase of the legal battle felt like a blur. Every morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, dreading what new twist or turn this nightmare might take. Evelyn and her team weren't backing down. If anything, they seemed more determined than ever to crush me. Letters continued to arrive, each one filled with thinly veiled threats and reminders of how much money they were demanding. It was exhausting, but I refused to let them see me crack. Daniel worked tirelessly behind the scenes, digging deeper into the HOA's history and practices. He spent hours poring over documents, searching for anything that could weaken their case. One evening, he called me with an update. His voice was calm, but tinged with excitement. "I think we've got something big," he said, "something that could change the entire game." When I met him at his office the next day, he spread out a stack of papers on his desk. They were copies of internal emails between Evelyn and other board members, emails that revealed far more than just arguments about guest rooms. In these messages, there were discussions about targeting specific homeowners who didn't fall in line, using lawsuits and fines to bully people into compliance. Worse still, there were hints of financial mismanagement, money being funneled out of the HOA's treasury for personal use. "This isn't just about you," Daniel explained. "They've been doing this to others too. Intimidation, manipulation. It's all part of their playbook. You're not alone in this fight." For the first time since this mess began, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe we could expose them, not just win my case, but dismantle the entire system that had been terrorizing homeowners for years. But then came the moment I least expected. As I drove home later that evening, I noticed a car parked near my gate, a sleek black sedan that definitely didn't belong to anyone in the neighborhood. Sitting inside was a man I didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a dark trench coat. He looked like someone straight out of a spy movie. When he saw me pull in, he stepped out of the car and approached me cautiously. "Are you your name?" he asked, tipping his hat slightly. "Yes," I replied warily. "Who are you?" He flashed a badge. "Detective Mark Harris. I'm investigating allegations of corruption within the Willow Ridge HOA, and I believe you may have information relevant to my case." My jaw dropped. Corruption. An investigation. This was bigger than I'd imagined. Detective Harris explained that several former homeowners had filed complaints against the HOA, accusing them of embezzlement, harassment, and abuse of power. He'd been gathering evidence for months but needed insiders willing to testify. "I know it's risky," he said, his tone serious. "But if you're ready to stand up, you could help bring them down for good." Standing there under the fading light of dusk, I realized the stakes had changed completely. This wasn't just about saving my home anymore. It was about justice. For me, for my neighbors, and for everyone else who'd been silenced by fear. But as much as I wanted to say yes, I couldn't shake the feeling that taking on the HOA meant stepping into dangerous territory. Still, deep down, I knew one thing. I couldn't turn back now. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. Reporters with notepads and cameras filled the benches, eager to cover what had become a highly publicized case. Neighbors I barely knew sat scattered throughout the room, some wearing expressions of quiet support, others looking uneasy, as if they weren't sure which side to root for. Evelyn and her team sat at one table, flanked by Gregory Mills, who exuded confidence in his tailored suit. Across the aisle, Daniel and I prepared our defense, surrounded by stacks of documents and evidence. As the proceedings began, the air grew heavy with tension. The judge entered, and everyone rose respectfully before settling back into their seats. Daniel stood first, addressing the court with calm authority. He started by breaking down the absurdity of Rule 34C, pointing out how vague and unreasonable it was. This so-called policy, he argued, is nothing more than an attempt to exert control over private property, a clear violation of basic homeowner rights. He then turned to the financial records we'd uncovered, presenting receipts and bank statements that showed Evelyn and other board members using HOA funds for personal vacations, luxury items, and even cosmetic surgery. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as he displayed photos of Evelyn lounging on a tropical beach, all paid for with money meant for community maintenance. But the real bombshell came when Detective Harris took the stand. Under oath, he detailed his investigation into the HOA's activities, revealing a pattern of corruption that went back years. He described how Evelyn and her cronies targeted homeowners who questioned their authority, using lawsuits and fines to silence dissent. One particularly damning piece of evidence was an audio recording of Evelyn admitting she'd filed charges against me simply to make an example of me. Evelyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat as the recording played. Her carefully crafted image of professionalism crumbled under the weight of the truth. Even Gregory seemed rattled, whispering urgently to her during breaks. For the first time since this ordeal began, I saw cracks in their armor, and it gave me a glimmer of hope. Still, despite the mounting evidence, fear lingered in the back of my mind. Evelyn wasn't the type to go down without a fight. As the trial progressed, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was plotting something, some last-ditch effort to regain control. Late one evening, after a long day in court, I returned home to find another letter taped to my door. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was unsigned, written in blocky capital letters. "Stay OP while you can." My hands trembled as I read the words. Was this Evelyn's doing? Or someone else in the neighborhood trying to scare me into backing off? I didn't know, but it only strengthened my resolve. If anything, it proved we were hitting a nerve. They were afraid. And that meant we were winning. By the end of the week, the courtroom drama had reached a fever pitch. Witnesses testified, lawyers argued, and the jury listened intently, their faces reflecting disbelief at the extent of the HOA's misconduct. But even as the tide seemed to turn in our favor, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that this battle wasn't over, not yet. Evelyn might lose the trial, but she wasn't the kind of person to accept defeat gracefully. Whatever happened next, I knew I needed to stay vigilant. After 3 grueling days of testimony, arguments, and evidence, the courtroom finally fell silent as the judge instructed the jury to begin deliberations. The wait was agonizing. Every minute felt like an hour, and every whispered conversation among the jurors made my heart race. Would they see through the HOA's lies, or would Evelyn and her team somehow wriggle their way out of this mess? When the verdict was finally announced, I almost didn't believe it at first. The foreman stood up, cleared his throat, and read the decision, in favor of the defendant. Cheers erupted in the courtroom. Friends, neighbors who had quietly supported me, even strangers joined in. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, snapping photos and shouting questions. Daniel turned to me with a wide grin, patting me on the back. "We did it," he said simply, but his words carried the weight of everything we'd fought for. The judge didn't stop there. She ruled that Rule 34C was unlawful, a blatant violation of property rights, and ordered the immediate dissolution of the Willow Ridge HOA. Their assets were frozen pending further investigation into the embezzlement allegations Detective Harris had uncovered. As Evelyn sat stone-faced at her table, Gregory muttered something under his breath before hastily gathering his papers. For once, Evelyn looked small, defeated, her polished facade crumbling completely. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me, shoving microphones in my face. "How does it feel to take on such a powerful organization?" one asked. "What's next for you?" another chimed in. I answered as best I could, trying to stay composed despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. Relief, anger, pride. They all collided in a storm I wasn't sure how to process. But through it all, one thing was clear. I had stood up for myself, and I had won. That night, I returned to my mountain house, exhausted but triumphant. Sitting on my porch with a cup of tea, I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The threat hanging over my head was gone, or so I thought. But peace didn't last long. The very next morning, I found a stack of anonymous letters shoved under my door. Some were from neighbors, accusing me of ruining the community by dismantling the HOA. Others were outright threatening, warning me to watch my back or face consequences. Even worse, strange cars began parking near my gate late at night, their headlights off, their occupants unseen. Whoever these people were, they wanted me to know they weren't happy, and they weren't going away. Evelyn disappeared shortly after the trial, leaving behind rumors of retaliation. Neighbors whispered about secret meetings where she supposedly plotted revenge against anyone who dared cross her. Whether those stories were true or not, I couldn't say, but they added to the growing sense of unease. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside my window, made me jump. Sleep became elusive, replaced by endless nights spent staring at shadows. Despite the fear, I refused to let them win. Not completely. I installed security cameras around the property and reached out to Detective Harris, who assured me he'd keep an eye on things. Still, the victory felt bittersweet. Yes, I had taken down a corrupt system, but at what cost? My quiet mountain retreat now felt like a fortress, its serenity shattered by mistrust and hostility. One evening, as I sat by the fireplace, I realized something important. This fight wasn't just about me. It was about standing up for what's right, no matter how hard it gets. And while the scars might never fully heal, I knew I'd done the right thing. Whatever came next, I was ready, or at least I hoped I was. Weeks turned into months, and life in the mountains slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The HOA was gone, its dissolution leaving behind a strange mix of relief and unease. Some neighbors started reaching out, apologizing for not standing by me sooner or thanking me for exposing the corruption that had poisoned our community for years. Others kept their distance, either out of lingering resentment or fear of being associated with trouble. It was hard to tell who felt what, but I tried not to dwell on it too much. What mattered most was that I had reclaimed my home and my peace. Still, the threats didn't vanish overnight. Anonymous notes continued to arrive sporadically, each one colder than the last. "You'll regret this," one read. "No one crosses us and gets away with it," said another. At first, they terrified me, but over time, I learned to steel myself against them. I installed better locks, motion sensor lights, and even a discreet security system connected directly to Detective Harris's office. It wasn't perfect, but it gave me some sense of control, a way to fight back without letting fear consume me. One crisp morning, as I stepped onto my porch with a cup of coffee, I noticed something unusual. A figure stood at the edge of my property, partially hidden by the trees. My heart skipped a beat until I recognized him. It was Mr. Grayson, an older neighbor who lived 2 houses down. He rarely spoke to anyone, and during the trial, he'd been eerily silent. But now, here he was, leaning on his cane, watching me intently. "You've stirred up quite the hornet's nest," he said when I approached cautiously. His voice was gravelly, his tone unreadable. "I didn't have a choice," I replied firmly. "They were wrong." He nodded slowly, almost approvingly. "Maybe so, but you should know, they don't forget. People like Evelyn, they hold grudges." His words sent a chill down my spine, but instead of retreating, I held his gaze. "Let them try," I said quietly. "I'm not backing down." To my surprise, Mr. Grayson chuckled softly. "Good. You've got guts, kid. Just be careful." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the woods as quickly as he'd appeared. I stood there for a long moment, wondering if his visit was a warning or a show of support. Either way, it reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. As winter settled over the mountains, blanketing everything in pristine white snow, I found solace in small victories. The deer returned to my yard, unbothered by the turmoil that had once gripped the neighborhood. Birds chirped cheerfully outside my window, their songs cutting through the silence. Even the threatening letters grew fewer and farther between, though I never let my guard down completely. One evening, Detective Harris called with news. Evelyn and several other former HOA members had been formally charged with embezzlement and fraud. Their trial would begin in the spring. Hearing those words brought a strange kind of closure. Justice might not erase the scars left behind, but it offered a glimmer of hope for me, for my neighbors, and for anyone else who'd ever felt powerless against abuse of authority. Now, sitting on my porch under a starlit sky, I think about how far I've come. This house isn't just 4 walls and a roof anymore. It's a symbol of resilience, of standing firm when others wanted me to crumble. The battle changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. There are days when the weight of it all feels overwhelming, but then I look out at the mountains, majestic and enduring, and remember why I fought so hard. The road ahead won't always be easy. Trust takes time to rebuild, and wounds take even longer to heal. But every sunrise reminds me that I made the right choice. No matter what happens next, they can't take this place away from me. Not truly. Because it's not just a house. It's my sanctuary, my victory, and my future, all rolled into one.